What is a pilgrim?
A pilgrim is one who has been called by the holy, however one understands the holy, to be a wanderer, to move across a field. That was the ancient understanding of the word. One feels cajoled or urged or nudged by God, and however one understands God, to move from point A to point B or to point Z, to however one understands it, to make a movement of faith, because the steps ahead aren't always easy to see. And sometimes you have to walk the faith in order to simply move. Path unknown.
What is a pilgrimage?
Well, the pilgrimage is then understood as Houston Smith, the religious scholar, said, it's belief in action, that one is actually moving in faith. One is actually moving down the road of life. One is moving from point A, like I said, to point Z, being called by God or urged by God or the holy in order to move maybe out of a crisis, maybe out of a dilemma, in order to gain some understanding or meaning behind what is going on in one's life or the community's life. So I like this idea that pilgrimage is faith in action, belief in action, that someone is walking, someone is moving, someone has moved out of a place that's causing heartache or questions and is coming to a new understanding of how one lives one life in the faith.
What are some examples of pilgrimage and being a pilgrim?
Well, there is the religious example in which one is part of a faith community and they feel the urge or the nudge to actually move in one's faith to a place that they're seeking some kind of meaning or understanding. But a pilgrim can also be, and a pilgrimage can also be political in nature. For example, the earlier civil rights marches in Washington, D.C., and now in other parts of our own country, in which people are urged or feel the nudge or need to feel the demonstration of being gathering with a group of people who share the same kind of political philosophy or theology or religious conviction about justice and are moving together because of that call to be in solidarity with each other.
What's the history or story of pilgrimage? How far back does it go?
I think that it goes as far back as, for example, for Jews and Muslims and Christians, it goes right back to Sarah and Abraham, in which they were called by God to go to a new land. And from that point on, Moses and others have always chosen to be on pilgrimage of some kind, have been called by God to be on pilgrimage. Indeed, Jesus himself was the pilgrim God, as one spiritual master talks about Jesus, because Jesus' life begins itself on a pilgrimage in which Joseph and Mary and the baby Jesus are taken away from the place of Jesus' birth in Bethlehem to Egypt. And from that point on, Jesus finds himself usually on pilgrimage, especially in his adult life, in which for 3 years he didn't claim a home. Indeed, his best friends, Mary and Martha and Lazarus, they were people that he would stay with, but he called his disciples to be pilgrims. So in a sense, Jesus is the pilgrim God who moves among the earth and around with us people here on earth in his earthly ministry. The very last week of Jesus' life was indeed a pilgrimage of sorts because he was there in Jerusalem observing the Passover, which again hails back to the understanding of Exodus.
Why is it important for you, Brett, as well as the church, mosque, synagogue, temple, or agnostic seeker who doesn't know what they believe but are seeking?
I started this whole pathway of pilgrimage in my own life, having written many things about it, and it was a group of Catholic friends who told me that I wrote beautiful things about pilgrimage, and it's too bad I've never been on one. So with their encouragement and their help and their support, I actually went on a pilgrimage in 1999 to Chimayo, northern New Mexico, 120 miles in 6 days, in which my understanding of faith, my understanding of God, my understanding of religious education was transformed at that moment. What I came to discover after digging deeper into the practices of pilgrimage is that all 5 major world religions themselves call their believers to go on a pilgrimage of sorts, that they talk about steps, they talk about transformation, they talk about the meaning of life after they go on a pilgrimage and the call to go on a pilgrimage in order to understand better their faith.
How does a pilgrimage support one's spiritual growth? Or is it one spiritual growth?
I think it is one spiritual growth. Indeed, an actual intentional pilgrimage is found in the larger context of the pilgrimage that is life. I think that's the beauty of pilgrimage, is that it helps us understand our faith, where we are today, by going on an actual pilgrimage to understand the broader journey that is our life, in which we meet God, in which we meet the holy in unexpected places.
What if I'm less able to go on a pilgrimage because of money, time, or physical abilities?
I think this is where my book, Practicing Pilgrimage, comes in, because not everyone can go to an exotic locale like the Holy Land or to the Camino de Santiago de Compostela. If we understand that we can do a pilgrimage right in our backyard or in the urban place that we live, around a church or a mosque or a synagogue, if we understand that our neighborhoods, our suburban enclaves are themselves a place for pilgrimage, this allows people who don't have the resources to actually understand that they can do a pilgrimage right where they are.
Why Practicing Pilgrimage, the book? Why did you write it? Why School of the Pilgrim?
Well, I began with a book of narratives called Follow Me, in which I had to go into what is a pilgrimage by going on these various pilgrimages of life, and then gathered these narratives together to kind of try to get an understanding of what is pilgrimage. The second book that I wrote was The School of the Pilgrim, in which I looked at the theory and the philosophy and the theology of pilgrimage. But this book, Practicing Pilgrimage, finally is a how-to book that a person who is living in the suburbs, who is living in the rural parts of the United States or any other part of the world, can actually go on a pilgrimage using this book to guide them as a true how-to manual for their life.